are a Sri Lankan bank. This is our home. That's why we are committed towards the future of this country, funding national development initiatives, because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Welcome to Lmd Tv. I'm Andrea Melissa. Continuing our series on the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, this week Anushin Selvaraja speaks with noted economist Deshal De Mel, followed by a frank discussion with Charitha Subasinghe, President Retail for John Keells Holdings.
Welcome to the show, Deshal. Now, the pandemic sweeping across the globe has had a massive impact on the global economy. But bringing it close to home, how do you view our economy as it stands right now?
It has hit Sri Lanka at a time when we already have a lot of vulnerabilities. So Sri Lanka is coming into this crisis on a fairly weak footing. We've had since 2017 the worst drought that the country's experienced in 40 years. In 2018, we had a constitutional crisis that had material ramifications for the economy as well. And then, of course, in 2019, we had the Easter Sunday attacks that had significant impacts on key sectors such as tourism and the rest of the economy as well. So as a result of these multiple shocks, Sri Lanka's economy has been battered over the last few years. GDP growth has been well below potential. Government fiscal position has been adversely affected by these as well. So all in all, it has been a fairly weak footing that we're trying to face up to this shock. And what that means is that, look, a lot of other countries are able to respond to this crisis with a lot more firepower and a lot more strength, whereas Sri Lanka doesn't have that same level of capacity to respond to the crisis and to actually to recover from the crisis in as soon as some of the other countries might be able to. So in that sense, the other fact is that, look, a lot of typical crises would be either a demand side shock or a supply side shock. Whereas in this case, what you're seeing is pretty much a dual crisis where you have significant impacts on our key export markets in Europe and the US, and at the same time, significant negative impacts on our supply chain with East Asia and China and India, all affected either through the virus itself or through the resultant lockdowns.
So with all the issues that we have faced, what have we learned?
So I think one thing that is an important takeaway is the importance of maintaining some kind of fiscal and macroeconomic space to be able to respond to shocks of this nature. So that's what a lot of other countries have been able to do, is because they have fiscal space and monetary space, they're able to respond in an aggressive way to meet the shortfalls that you're seeing in aggregate demand in these countries. In Sri Lanka, unfortunately, we've had weaknesses in our fiscal space for many years, and that has been further exacerbated by the tax policy changes at the end of 2019. All of this has resulted in Sri Lanka's capacity to respond as a state to state revenue by spending on vulnerable sectors, by spending on vulnerable industries. That space is very limited. So I think one very important takeaway is that, look, we have to maintain this kind of macroeconomic space to be able to respond to crises of this nature. On a more positive side, what we have also seen is that, look, a lot of businesses, particularly in the service sector, have been able to in some way continue operation. So the usage of technology, the facilities of remote work, e-commerce, digital finance, all of these have proven to be have really been quite effective, at least in the urban sector in this period.
On that note, are there any economic benefits to opening early? Is it worth trading off a possible local health crisis and the advantages that we have achieved so far?
If you look at countries like Sri Lanka and other developing economies, one common characteristic is that we all have large informal economies, right? So it's not like, say, Western Europe or in the US, where most of the economy is in the formal sector. People are going to receive their wages and salaries. In a lot of developing economies, an informal sector, employees in the informal sector are much more vulnerable in terms of livelihoods and incomes. So in Sri Lanka, we have about 1.9 million daily wage earners. and about 2.9 million total in the informal sector. So these are large components of the labor force, and these sectors are the most vulnerable in a situation of economic shutdown or lockdown that we are seeing today. And in that context, I don't see it as being sustainable to have this kind of strict curfew for a prolonged period, because people are just simply unable to go out and carry out their livelihood and unable to earn a living to be able to survive. So we cannot be considered in the same way that we would look at some of the more advanced economies in the world. So we have to look at it through that lens. And so I think in that lens, it's important that we find some kind of middle ground where people do have some chance of earning a livelihood and being able to put food on the table as well.
Now, supposing we come out of this relatively better off, there is going to be a whole new platter of risks. Now, what would you say are the biggest risks that the economy would face?
So I think the immediate big ticket risk that I'd focus on is our external debt refinancing. Because this year we have about $6 billion worth of liabilities that are maturing, coming up for repayment. We have reserves of about $7.4 billion. So there's not a lot of space and not a lot of leeway in between there. And also global markets are in a very risk-averse mode right now. So the appetite for markets to take on emerging market debt like Sri Lanka's is very limited. So therefore, we need to find alternative ways of servicing this the debt that is coming up for refinancing this year. And as we must at any cost, we must avoid any kind of default on this debt. So to me, that is the most important headline risk that I see in the immediate horizon.
Now, on a segment of our imports, Deshal, oil prices have plummeted below rock bottom, so to speak. Now, what are the implications for us? Now, we are a net importing country when it comes to oil. Along with that, now, should we not have seen some sort of relief being passed on to the consumers?
Yeah, it's been, I don't think anybody has seen this kind of volatility in global oil prices in history. On the 20th of April, WTI crude prices went to negative $34 a barrel, which is unheard of. The problem there is that there is no storage facilities, so people just simply do not want to accept deliveries. For a net oil importer like Sri Lanka, of course, it is very beneficial to have global prices coming down. And really, the positive that I see here is that it gives the opportunity for the government to claw back some revenue that it has lost from the tax policy changes in the latter part of 2019. So there is scope to recover some degree of government revenue through the global reduction in prices. There's also some opportunity for some stabilization of CPC's financial position as well. And I think so these are positives from a macroeconomic perspective. And I think it's in order to capture these positives that the government has been reluctant to pass on some of the benefits of the reduced prices to the consumer.
How do you see our currency performing right now?
Yeah, it's been very volatile. What is interesting is that if you look at the current account of the balance of payments, it is by and large in balance, because whilst we have seen a large drop in exports from sectors like apparel and so on, going forward, they will be very adversely affected. Also tourism, remittances, those will have significant downturns, but at the same time, we're also going to have a lot lower imports as well this year. So starting from oil to a number of other sectors, either through the general decline in demand or because of the restrictions that the government is imposing. By and large, on the current account, the balance of payments will be fairly in balance. But it is really in the capital account where we have some concerns, largely driven by the outflows of debt repayments that are falling due this year. And I think that is what is really driving the negative sentiment on the currency.
As a final question, Deshal, what would you say are the next three most vital steps that should be taken to safeguard and ultimately bring the economy out of this hole?
Yeah. So the first step would be to restore confidence in the global markets in Sri Lanka. And so for that, I think it's important what they have announced, that the government has started a conversation with the International Monetary Fund. And I think that is important to take that forward. to restore some credibility and confidence in the currency and in the market in general. And then it's also important to, as soon as feasible, as I mentioned earlier, to start gradually opening up the economy to allow people to start working again, particularly keeping in mind those sectors that are in the informal sector, those whose livelihoods are most vulnerable. It's important to gradually start opening up to enable those livelihoods to come back online. Of course, this has to be done, as I said, whilst investing in the necessary public healthcare services and capacity. Yeah, and I think those two are the most critical immediate steps that the government should really be focusing on.
Thank you very much for joining us, Deshal.
Thank you, Anushan. Take care.
That was economist Deshal De Mel. Up next, we have Charitha Subasinghe from John Keells Holdings after a short message from our sponsors.
We are a Sri Lankan bank. This is our home. That's why we are committed towards the future of this country, funding national development initiatives, because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.
Welcome back. In keeping with our focus on the pandemic's impact on our economy, joining me is Charitha Subasinghe from John Keells Holdings, and he will share with us his views on how the Keells supermarkets chain has managed this crisis. Welcome to the show, Charitha. Now, how has COVID-19 affected the retail sector and Keells supermarkets in particular?
Before I get into Keells operation, I think it has been a very interesting last 6 weeks overall. If you look at it with this COVID virus coming and the lockdown, if you just take 2 steps back to understand how the different businesses world over have also responded, gives you an indication on how agile that organization is and how innovative that organization is in terms of being able to change their business model almost overnight. I mean, that is basically what has happened across all businesses. And also on the other side, I think it also tested the value system of that business. Let me go into a little more details on that. Let's say, on what values the business is built on. Let's say, is it a caring organization? Does it care for the customer? Does it care for the internal stakeholders? Is it an organization which works on excellence? When I mean by excellence is that, is it an organization that works to deliver that? It is not a promise they just make, but ensuring the promise is delivered. We were built, our system was to cater to 150,000 customers on a daily basis to walk into our store and do their shopping. I mean, that was our business. And if you take the delivery business, we didn't do not more than 100 deliveries for a day. I mean, that was the business that we were built on. And even the infrastructure, the online platform was 17 to 18 years old. Ironically, this was the year that we were going to set up a new online platform, ironically. So, but all that was happening, and all of a sudden the lockdown happened, and we had to overnight change to a delivery model, right? I mean, that is where it is. And it is no secret that we also got quite a bashing on social media that our online platform was not right, and we were not agile to all that. But we went on those values that we established in our business: integrity, excellence, caring, and the innovation. And that was what we worked on. And from day one, what we wanted was, if we went out and took an order, we wanted to ensure that it got delivered within a reasonable period of time to the consumer, rather than just gulp in a lot of business and not being able to deliver on time. So proud to say that as at today, we are able to deliver to 30,000 households on a daily basis.
On that note, what measures do you bring in specifically to shift into this new operational mode?
Yeah, so on our side, almost within 2 weeks, we got our online platform sorted out, moved into an Azure cloud where we were able to scale up our operations. We sorted out a lot of interface issues the consumer had, improved on the customer experience and that aspect. And now with that online platform, we are now able to scale up to easily to 10 to 20,000 on daily basis. Then on the other side, we also something that we also did was that we knew the customer shopping patterns were also were changing. Initially, it was a panic mode just to get your rice and sugar and dal. But after a while, they wanted something broader. So the online platform is, when we started, we had only about 100 SKUs, items on the online platform. But now we are at about 200 SKUs, and by Friday, we want to bring it to about 300. So that is in line with the customer journey as well.
So what are the challenges to implementation that you are facing at this point of time?
The biggest challenge today is the manpower. Simply because before the lockdown, I mean, our staff population, if you look at it, about 95% of the population are from the rural. So there was a lot of pressure. The same fear the consumer was there with that staff member as well. The fear, and most of them went home. So from day one, we have been working with about 1/3 of our normal staff cadre. So that is the biggest challenge we have, to maximize on the available resource. And also, we also do need to give them the necessary rest time, the break time, because I mean, you can't just grind them to an absolute, situation where they get totally exhausted. So that is the biggest challenge we have.
Charitha, you mentioned manpower as a challenge going forward. Now, if you do come out of this unscathed, would you be carrying out both the brick and mortar and online delivery platforms? And if so, what sort of space would open up for opportunities with the organization?
Yes, actually, that is a very, very pertinent question. Simply because I think if you look at it, the macro conditions, the economic conditions in the country is going to have a lot of problems over the next 12 months. I mean, it is very apparent with the leisure industry getting impacted. So with the garment industry to all that. So even if you look at world over, while the other day I was watching on CNN, while in USA, where on a weekly basis, there are about 1.6 million to 2 million jobs, people losing jobs. On the other side, Walmart is recruiting 100,000 at least for a week. So that you could see the shift in the demand for work is also going to change. And I see that happening at Keells as well as the retail industry as well, where possibly the retail industry, the food and grocery retail industry possibly would be the only, or possibly the only business that will continuously recruit on. So even that context, over the last few weeks, what we also did was that we also have a FB Keells career page, where we went out and said, look here, you guys are, if anyone wants income stream, please contact us and we will recruit. And as of today, we were able to recruit, as of today, about 400 such people who have said, look, I've lost my job, I'm looking for an additional income stream. And in that context, we have also recruited. So recruitment will continue. I think there will be certain constraints of people moving from district to district. So our concentration has been to recruit from the same district, specifically Colombo, Kalutara, and Gampaha, because that is where the majority of our outlets are in. So we will continuously recruit from that district as well. I think maybe to touch a little bit on some of the area that you did initial talk of whether we will be an omni-channel business to continue, or when the lockdown is taken off, would we just concentrate purely on the business that is walk in the brick and mortar business? But I think over the next 12 months, if you look at it, the ways of working of the business will change, simply because I think what we have understood listening to the different pundits world over is that until a proper vaccination as well as a testing mechanism which can test a larger population of the country, there will always be the social distancing that would happen, and there is certain constraints of the way that you're going to do business in terms of shopping or going to a restaurant to eat and so on and so forth. And it is in that context that we have taken a view that we are actually at the moment working on post the lockdown, how do we still maintain that delivery going forward.
Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Charitha.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show this week. Tune in next week at the same time. I'm Anushan Selvaraja, and you've been watching Lmd TV.
We are a Sri Lankan bank. This is our home. That's why we are committed towards the future of this country, funding national development initiatives, because we believe in banking beyond transactions. HNB, your partner in progress.